Now, I just want to remind people that Daniel Ellsberg, who was the person who revealed the Pentagon Papers and is a hero, tweeted out in support of Julian Assange. And let me just read you some of the stuff that he tweeted out. He said, "How dare Biden lecture anybody today while refusing to pardon Daniel Hale and Julian Assange, thereby killing freedom of the press for national security." He says, "Every attack now made on Julian Assange and WikiLeaks was made against me and release of Pentagon Papers. Let me see. I tell Colbert that Assange is not a criminal under the U.S. law and Manning is a hero. Why I support WikiLeaks and Julian Assange." Here, and he gives a link. So that's Daniel Ellsberg, right? So now he gets it, and he gets all the same attacks that are coming at Julian Assange were launched at him too. So now I want to show you. This is Joe Scarborough, hosts the MSNBC show, former congressman. And here's what he had to say about Julian Assange.
Claire McCaskill, there is a lot of smoke surrounding Julian Assange. Of course, there were the charges in Sweden that were subsequently dropped. There is the hacking and his vendetta against Hillary Clinton. There's information that was released that showed military malfeasance by the United States. But, you know, it's so interesting that it used to be the far left who opposed George W. Bush's wars in Afghanistan and Iraq who made this guy a hero under the guise of the First Amendment. And then when he started leaking information against Hillary Clinton, it became the Trump right that suddenly held Julian Assange. So, but let's just forget the politics of this. As a prosecutor, you're given this case, and you've got a guy who's stolen thousands of documents, pages.
So I'm just going to stop it there briefly, just to let you know, everything he said pretty much is bullshit. And it's a
lie. It's that core statement that Julian stole documents is a complete and utter lie, unless you're willing to say that the New York Times stole the Pentagon Papers, that I stole the NSA archive. You know, it's just a complete and total lie. But of course, that's permissible on MSNBC.
That 100% lie, right? Now, if I did that kind of a lie on YouTube, they'd take my channel down. But you could do that stuff on NBC all the time, MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post. They do it on the regular, and they'll never get taken down by YouTube. Okay, here we go.
Of highly classified national security documents, release them to the world, and in so doing, put the lives of U.S. troops, of people who were working with the United States, allies, collaborators in war zones, in the gravest of danger.
Okay, that's also a lie. There's no Glenn, do you know of any evidence that would back up that Julian?
Jimmy, not only is there no evidence of that, but the military itself acknowledged it was a lie. When they first published these documents, the military said WikiLeaks is going to have blood on their hands. 3 months later, the senior official at the Pentagon said that's hysterical. There's no evidence that anybody was. Oh, yeah. So I was saying that, you know, not only did the Pentagon official admit that this was a hysterical narrative, that the WikiLeaks had blood on their hands because of these publications, that no one had ever been harmed. McClatchy in 2011, you can go Google it, did a long, deep expose to prove that the Pentagon, no one inside the Pentagon could point to a single person who was ever endangered, let alone put in grave harm's way as a result of the publications, because WikiLeaks was very careful to redact numerous documents, to not publish others. They are trying to imply, like they always do, they did it in the Snowden case too, like that they were just publishing willy-nilly the identity of undercover agents or people who in various countries were working with the United States. It's a complete fabrication. No one was ever, but it's amazing to watch one lie after the next by these networks who constantly claim to care so much about disinformation that they want to censor the internet in the name of combating it. These aren't misleading statements or tendentious opinions. They're outright lies.
So let's go back to more of his outright. I mean, this is just nonstop lying at MSNBC. by a guy who, again, indignant. I love how they do it so indignantly. Here we go.
Under any scenario, you take politics out of it. And this is an open and shut case. This is not the Pentagon Papers. This wasn't Times editors rifling through.
Now, if you remember, I just showed you Daniel Ellsberg, who is the guy's source for the Pentagon Papers, said this is exactly like the Pentagon Papers. So again, Joe Ball is just wrong. Here we go.
Documents, figuring out what could be released and what couldn't be released and explaining it. This was a guy that got stolen documents and gave it to the world.
And so now he just contradicted his own lie. So at first he said that that Julian Assange stole the documents, and now he said this guy got a hold of stolen documents. Those are two totally different things. One is illegal, one totally legal. Do you see what Joe Scarborough is doing here?
Also, Jimmy, before you go on, I'm sorry, it's just driving me crazy. Also, what he's saying is a complete lie again, in that when WikiLeaks got these documents in 2010, they partnered with the New York Times, which published the Pentagon Papers and the Guardian, and they carefully did exactly what Joe Scarborough was falsely saying they didn't do, which is curated the documents, explained them, reported them, withheld some, redacted others, exactly what the New York Times did with the Pentagon Papers.
Exactly. So again, it's just nonstop. I mean, this is the stuff they accuse people on YouTube of doing, being misinformation. This is 100%. This isn't only misinformation. These are lies. And if Joe Scarborough, I'm going to go ahead and say he knows they're lies and he doesn't care. Because if he doesn't know their lies, he should be in a coma. He hosts a goddamn news show. Of course he knows what the story is. Of course he's lying and pushing propaganda, because that's what gets rewarded in corporate news. So let's go. There's more.
This is a pretty simple case. It's very straightforward. And the beauty of a trial, Joe, is that you narrow.
It is a simple case. It is pretty straightforward. It's First Amendment, freedom of the press. That's the case. And there shouldn't be one at all. It is straightforward. This guy's doing journalism, and you guys are now assaulting the First Amendment and journalism and freedom of the press. And you're doing it all. You're doing it as if you're Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, when these people are fascists and liars. Okay.
All of the extraneous stuff to the charges that are there against the defendant. And the charges in this case are that he was trying to hack into our military information that protects not just our country, but all the men and women in uniform around the world. This is really serious stuff. Forget about the politics. The fact that both the right and the left don't like Julian Assange or love Julian Assange, depending on the circumstances is being talked about, that should tell you all you need to know. This is really a guy who just violated the law. And, you know, I kind of laugh. If their fight against extradition is that they're worried about his safety in prison, they really don't have perspective on this. There are lots and lots of people who go to federal prison who have done really worse things than Julian Assange, and they are protected in prison. I don't think he needs to worry about whether or not he'll be safe in prison. This is really just a smokescreen to try to keep him from ever being accountable for the rule of law. You know, we started talking about Trump being accountable. This is a really important piece for the American rule of law to get him back to the United States and face these charges.
He could.
Jimmy, I'm sorry. I just can't take it. You go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You jump in.
Okay. I fucking hate Democrats. Like, they are the ultimate authoritarians. It's very clear beyond everything else that they have no fucking clue what they're talking about. They didn't prepare for that segment. They have no idea what's going on in this case. Even that last thing she said, the argument that he doesn't feel he's going to be safe in prison, that wasn't the argument at all. The argument was raised by his lawyers that the U.S. prison system is so harsh and repressive to people who are accused of national security crimes that he is likely, given his mental health deterioration from having been in detention and imprisonment for the last 10 years, he's likely to commit suicide, which under British law means they can't extradite him to the United States. There was no suggestion that he wasn't going to be safe in prison. They have no idea what they're talking about. Furthermore, there's no accusation that he was trying to hack into military systems. Chelsea Manning is the one who took the documents. The only accusation is that he tried to help her evade detection by cracking a password so that they wouldn't be able to tie it to her. So I can't even analyze the kind of say this argument is invalid. This logical string is unconvincing because everything they're saying about the case is factually false. Everything Joe Scarborough and Claire McCaskill just said about the case is a complete and utter lie. And this is why I have no problem admitting that I really do hate Democrats. I hate them. They're everything that they claim Trump is. They sit there and they do these segments that are filled with disinformation and lies, all geared toward justifying the government imprisoning a journalist. That's really all they want to do. So how is it that Donald Trump could ever be worse than what it is that we just saw in that segment? They are everything they accuse Donald Trump of being.
And that's the message that I've been putting forth at this show. And of course, you know how it's been received on the left. And well, here's how it's been received. Here's a Twitch star, right?
He's from a great genetic pool because he's Zhang's nephew.
Cenk Uygur's nephew, and they're having a dumb off. They're trying to see who could be dumber. And I think Assange does it just because he has the black fingernail polish on and calls other people creepy. Here we go.
Bro, why are you not mentioning hero Julian Assange being extradited? What the fuck is wrong with you? Assange stands on the internet are some of the most psychotic weirdos that it's just like, just stop, okay?
Psychotic weirdos, he says as he flashes his black fingernail polish. Okay. And he says, just stop.
Just be normal. Just stop.
Be normal.
Do your fucking weird thing at the Jimmy Dore stream. Okay, this is not the Jimmy Dore stream. We do a bunch of different content here. Go hang out with like weirdo fucking fascists. Okay, bro. Why?
So that's kind of remarkable. It runs in the family. They stand for the Democratic Party and shit on journalists and encourage fascists while calling other people fascists. It's funny. The funniest thing is the black nail polish, but go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, no, I mean, I actually pointed that out, and I, basically said these pseudo-socialists who know that they never actually do anything threatening. He's basically Jim Acosta with nail polish.
Yes.
Hassan.
Yes.
There's a reason why Julian Assange is targeted by the CIA and the Justice Department and the British security services and governments around the world and is in Belmarsh prison. And he's in his, house on Twitch. And he thinks he's so radical because he has like a hammer and sickle flag that he hangs on his wall and he calls himself a socialist. And then at the end of the day, like when it comes down to it, he tells everybody to go vote for Gavin Newsom, like the good little DNC boy that he is.
Yes.
So that, again, I think the reason why he doesn't want to talk about Julian Assange and gets angry at people who demand that he does and suggests that if you care about the Assange case, it basically means you're a fascist, that you belong in the Jimmy Dore show, is because he, again, knows that Julian Assange is what he pretends to be. Now, when I said that, he objected and he pointed to a few places where he had in the past said he thinks it's wrong for the government to try and imprison Julian Assange for life under the Espionage Act, which is true. He has kind of in a throwaway way, said that. Of course, none of them want to admit that they're on the side of the CIA. None of them want to admit that they want to see Julian Assange. If they're forced to talk about it, they'll say, yeah, look, as he put it, I'm against putting him in forever jail. But you can see from that clip that even if he says, if you force him to take a position, that he's not in favor of putting Julian Assange in prison for life under the Espionage Act, that he really doesn't give a shit. It doesn't bother him at all. It's not a priority for him. He thinks people who want to talk about it are fascist weirdos because they don't, Jimmy, this is the reality, is left-wing politics since, the end of World War II has been about opposing the deep state, the security state, the CIA, the FBI. This is fundamental to left-wing politics, is the idea that these are pernicious agencies. And that's why real leftists, like not this kind, who, have like leftism as a marketing brand, but like real leftists, like Daniel Ellsberg and Noam Chomsky and fucking Lula da Silva in Brazil and Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, have all come out and said Julian Assange is a hero. And the attempt to imprison him is outrageous. Like, you don't need to force them or drag them into commenting on it. They don't call people who are interested in it fascist weirdos. They come out and manifest on their own, because this is central to what left-wing politics has been about, what Julian Assange has been doing for the last 12 to 15 years, bringing transparency and real resistance and opposition to the belly of American imperialism. But they don't really give a shit about that. If anything, they see the CIA and the FBI as allies of theirs. Of course, they'll never admit that. They're never going to go on a stream and be like, hey, I'm a radical leftist. I'm here to say I love the CIA and the FBI. But the reality is they knew that the CIA and the FBI were on their side when it came to Trump. They don't really care about people who oppose the CIA or the FBI. It's way down on their priority list, if it even makes it at all. You never see Antifa, for example, protesting in front of Langley or the J. Edgar Hoover headquarters in the FBI. They think that like real fascist power doesn't emanate from those Washington agencies, but like emanates from loser Proud Boy guys, you know, hanging out in groups of 15 and 20 people that the FBI also wants to prosecute, and then half of them are FBI informants anyway. That's what left-wing politics is about. It's performative, it's petty, it's trivial. Everything that Julian Assange isn't, and that's what explains that reaction.
That's exactly. Well, I'll show you the people you were mentioning. So here's all the people who are supporting Julian Assange. So press freedom. So there's all these civil liberty groups. Asked Biden's department to drop the Julian Assange case. Press freedom groups reacted. This is the Reporters Without Borders are supporting him. And here's Lula, who you spoke about. Of course, here's Daniel Ellsberg. Here's another. The Committee to Protect Journalists issued a statement over it. So, and here is Noam Chomsky. Here's also even Tucker Carlson. So, and here I'll show you what Noam Chomsky had to say.
Assange has performed an enormous service to all the people in the world who treasure the values of freedom and democracy, and who therefore demand the right to know what their elected representatives are doing. And for that very reason, he's one of the most dangerous criminals on the face of the earth, pursued with savagery by the rulers of the free and democratic societies. And there's a reason. There is a basic principle of government that's well understood by serious analysts. Actually, it was explained quite clearly by the professor of the science of government at Harvard University, the distinguished liberal political scientist and government advisor, Samuel Huntington. He observed, I'll quote him, that the architects of power in the United States must create a force that can be felt but not seen. Power remains strong when it remains in the dark. Exposed to the sunlight, it begins to evaporate. And he gave some telling examples concerning the real nature of the Cold War. He was discussing U.S. military intervention abroad, and he observed, I'll quote him again, that you may have to sell intervention or other military action in such a way as to create the misimpression that it is the Soviet Union that you're fighting. That's what the United States has been doing ever since the Truman Doctrine. And there are many illustrations of that leading principle. Well, Julian Assange has committed the grave crime of exposing power to sunlight, which may cause power to evaporate if the population grasps the opportunity.
So that's what Noam Chomsky had to say. And that was fun. I mean, that's just amazing and fantastic. Anything else you'd like to add, Glenn? Because I know, well, here's what you tweeted. You said Democrats want Assange in prison for life because his 2016 reporting reflected poorly on Hillary and the DNC, and they think it helped Trump. I showed you those examples. Democrats are complete authoritarians, craving the imprisonment of journalists who oppose them. They're everything they claimed that Trump was. I mean, we could just keep making this point. Can I show you one more video, which is one of my favorites? You tweeted this out. I've showed this on the show before. It's the president of the Azerbaijan. Now, he is an authoritarian, but he's also right that no Western journalist has any right or credibility to assume a position of moral superior about press freedom attacks, given what the U.S. and the UK are doing to Assange. So here is a Western journalist asking him about why don't you have press freedom in Azerbaijan, and here's what he says back.
You raise this question. Can I ask you also one? How do you assess what happened to Mr. Assange? Is it a reflection of free media in your country?
We're not here to discuss
no,
my
let's
country.
Discuss. Let's discuss.
No, President
In order
Ali.
to accuse me, saying that Armenians will not have free media here, let's talk about Assange. How many years he spent in Ecuadorian embassy? And for what? And where is he now? For journalistic activity. You kept that person hostage, actually killing him morally and physically. You did it, not us, and now he's in prison. So you have no moral right to talk about free media when you do these things.
Returning to the conflict.
Better return to the conflict, because this is not what you like. You like only to accuse, only to attack. But look at the mirror. Look, I tell many times, before coming and lecturing us, and in your question, accusing me, it's not a question, it's accusation. You talk like a prosecutor. Why? If you're so democratic and so objective, why you keep Assange in prison? For what? You keep him in prison because of his journalistic activity.
I'm not keeping him in prison, President Aliyev. But
you don't like this.
So anyway, so you get the drift of what was happening. When a Western journalist actually gets pushback from somebody, they got nothing to say. They don't know what to say about Julian Assange because they don't want to lose their job at their corporate news place, because if they tell the truth about Julian Assange, they will lose their job at their corporate news place. And there's a guy, a corrupt authoritarian, is able to call out a Western journalist correctly and dress them down. That's how shitty the Western media is about this, and the Western governments. Anything you'd like to say about that, Glenn?
You know, everyone, first of all, that video is like pornographic to me, but everyone knows that the mythology that the United States and the UK are these grave, these bold, intrepid defenders of democracy and freedom. There's only a tiny group of people who know that's not bullshit. Everywhere in the world, that provokes that kind of scorn, that kind of laughter. The only people who actually believe that are the idiots who work for media corporations inside the United States and the UK. They're the ones who actually believe that it's places like Russia and Iran and China and North Korea and Venezuela and Cuba or whatever that imprison journalists. And we in the United States would never do that unless Trump is president. So it is like a shock to the system when they actually hear that the things that they're accusing the rest of the world of doing, they have no moral credibility to actually accuse, because in their own countries, she's right. Maybe she's not like the actual jailer turning the key to lock Assange in the cage, but it's people like her and Jim Acosta who either don't give a shit, acquiesce to it, or in many cases support it. But let me just make one other point. You know, I know that you've received the criticism about going on Tucker Carlson's show. I certainly have as well. And the reason why I will never make any apologies at all, and why I harbor nothing but contempt and scorn for that criticism, is because while NBC is filled with people like Joe Scarborough and Claire McCaskill justifying the imprisonment of a journalist based on lies, and while CNN, if they ever cover the Assange story, is basically designed to do the same, to justify it, Tucker Carlson went on a fucking crusade to try and free Julian Assange while Donald Trump was president. Night after night after night, knowing that Trump was watching, he would do monologues saying, why is Julian Assange in prison? He did nothing wrong. He put on celebrities like Roger Waters and Pamela Anderson, knowing that Trump loves celebrities and loves to hear from them, who advocated for Assange. He put on Julian Assange's fiance and his brother and father to advocate for Assange. I know you went on and advocated for him. I went on dozens of times and was able to speak directly to Trump, asking for a pardon and advocating for a pardon for Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. Why would I confine myself to the media outlets that are these authoritarian liberals who lie for the CIA and refuse to go on the one actual place on television that is defending press freedoms? You know, when the Brazilian government tried to prosecute me for the reporting I was doing in Brazil, when Jair Bolsonaro was threatening to imprison me, Tucker Carlson recorded a video privately and then sent it to Brazil, which made a huge impact because the Brazilian right obviously listens to Fox News. And they were saying, why is Tucker Carlson defending Glenn Greenwald, who we've been told is like this leftist enemy, the root of all evil? And he covered the story that when I was finally indicted, he condemned the Bolsonaro government for doing that vehemently. And he was probably the single most vocal defender of Julian Assange's press freedom rights. So if you ask me why I go on Fox News, it's because on the critical issues of the day, like Russiagate, which Fox News got right and the rest of the media got wrong, or imprisoning journalists, or the question of whether we should have free speech on the internet, or let big tech control and police and censor our discourse, Fox News is infinitely more correct and honest and has way more integrity in the reporting they do than NBC and CNN and the New York Times and the Washington Post. That's the reason I go on Fox. Not because I've changed my views. I've been advocating for Julian Assange since 2010, since before they even did the big story about the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs. The problem is that it is now American liberalism in which real authoritarianism resides. The face of authoritarianism is Jim Acosta and Joe Scarborough and Cenk Geiger, whatever the fuck his name is, and Claire McCaskill, implicitly justifying the imprisonment of Julian Assange. If you want to go and advocate for anti-establishment politics and to really challenge real institutions of power, the places you go are the Joe Rogan show or Tucker Carlson show or this show or Rumble or Substack, or places that aren't controlled by these institutional corporate centers of power. And the reason why establishment liberals hate us for going on Tucker is not because they think Tucker's ideology is bad or that our ideology has changed. They know it hasn't. It's because they know that that's where real anti-establishment politics takes place, while they're captive to Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party and Chuck Schumer and the Biden DOJ and Claire McCaskill and Joe Scarborough and Gavin Newsom. That's the reason they're angry.
That's exactly the reason. And yeah, I make no apologies ever for going on to talk to half the country and bring my politics to half the country. Tucker Carlson himself said on the air with me that he changed his mind on Julian Assange based partly on the strength of my arguments. So that's the big, that used to be what is considered the left a victory. You know, I saw a tweet the other day. Someone said, hey, what are we supposed to do when Trumpers want to join our union? And the response was, you declare victory, you idiot. That's what you do. And
they don't want to win, Jimmy. They don't want to win. They love the narrative of persecution. They love saying that they have no support, that nobody, that their politics are too radical or too edgy or too scary in order for people to support. They love the narrative of self-victimization and persecution. The reason they don't want to win is because they would have to give that up.
That's exactly right. Yeah, they could no longer be professional victims. And right. you get a higher social status in America by the amount of victimization that you can claim. And that's a fact. And I can't claim any, so I'm pretty low down in the stratus. You know what was interesting? We should probably go, but you talked about how in 2019 you wrote an op-ed and you warned about them prosecuting Julian Assange and how they're going to use this this kind of tactics on other journalists. And son of a bitch, if they didn't use it to you, Brazil's attack on Greenwald mirrors the U.S. case against Assange. So can you speak to that briefly?
Yeah. So when the indictment against Julian Assange was released and I read it, it was immediately obvious to me that it was an attempt to criminalize journalism itself. The tactic that censors use is when they want to institute a regime of censorship, they pick people in the first instance that they know are so unpopular that nobody will care. So the first people to be banned from the internet were people like Alex Jones and Milo Yiannopoulos. Nobody stood up and objected, because if you did, people would say, why are you defending Alex Jones and Milo Yiannopoulos? And you'd be like, I'm not defending Milo and Alex Jones, you fucking imbecile. I'm defending freedom of speech and the fact that this precedent is soon going to, once it's implanted, expand and start restricting all of our speech. But they couldn't get past the personalities. So the same thing they want to do here. They want to create a precedent that will criminalize journalism itself and hope that and know that and expect that the hatred that people have for Julian Assange is so intense that they'll just say, we want to see him in prison and we don't care about the precedent. So the article I wrote in the Washington Post, when it was unveiled, was saying, look, the things that they're trying to criminalize him for doing, working with his source, encouraging her to give more documents, helping her evade detection, are things that investigative journalists do all the time with their sources. In fact, again, it's not only the right of an investigative journalist to try and get more from your source and encourage your source not to get caught and to tell them how not to. It's your duty of source protection. It's something investigative journalists do all the time. And so what I was saying was, look, you idiots in the media, even if you hate Julian Assange, you should still be outraged by this indictment, because if this is allowed to take hold, this theory of criminalization, it can criminalize any journalist, including you. And it was 2 weeks later, in June of 2019, that we began our year-long expose that led to the freeing of former President Lula da Silva in Brazil based on these hacked telephone logs and chats and conversations that my source obtained and gave to me. And it destabilized the Brazilian government. It resulted in the annulment of numerous convictions of politicians, because the people who were corrupt was the judge and the prosecutors. And Bolsonaro had been threatening to prosecute me, kept saying he may spend some time in prison, Glenn Greenwald might. And so finally in January 2020, they actually they indicted my sources, my alleged sources, and added me to the indictment. And their theory was exactly the same theory that the U.S. is currently using to try and criminalize what Assange did, namely claiming that I didn't just passively receive information, that when I was talking to my source, I was helping my source evade detection. And when I did that, I became guilty of obstruction of justice and became part of the conspiracy. And the Brazilian judge wanted to accept that charge. The Brazilian judge said, I think Glenn Greenwald, when he did this with his source, did become part of the criminal conspiracy. I wish I could accept these charges, but the Brazilian Supreme Court had issued a ruling saying that any retaliation against me for my reporting would be a violation of the Constitution. And the judge said, I'm barred by the Supreme Court from accepting these charges. So he dismissed them, but he said he would have accepted them had it not been for that Supreme Court ruling. So the irony was, I was warning everybody else, look, this theory is going to be copied by the US government, people around the world, to criminalize journalism. If you want to go and publish, say, secret documents of Russia or China or Iran, maybe they're going to now indict you and seek your extradition. So when you're traveling internationally, there'll be an Interpol red alert warning for you that requires your arrest and extradition to those countries. And it was just so happened the first person that was victimized by that precedent almost was me in Brazil when they try and prosecuted me using that precedent. But so many of these, the reason that argument doesn't get through, Jimmy, to so many of these media figures is because they know they don't actually do journalism. Like obviously Joe Scarborough, what he's doing is, it's not journalism. No one's going to try and arrest or prosecute Joe Scarborough. They don't do anything dangerous or threatening to power centers. So they don't feel, and they're probably right, that this is actually threatening to them. It's only threatening to people who do real investigative journalism, which they know doesn't include them.
100%. Okay, so I have some bad news to share. I've been informed several contacts have just texted me to let me know that it's been reported that Julian Assange has suffered a stroke. So that's horrible. That's horrible news, but I can't believe he's been able to stand up this long without a major health thing like that. So thoughts and prayers and whatever, if that's the kind of thing you do it for Julian Assange. But keep your outrage over the establishment that's stealing your First Amendment rights. The establishment is stealing your freedom of the press. The establishment is stealing your right to know. That's who you should remain upset at. And don't listen to the assholes at MSNBC and CNN and the New York Times and the Washington Post and 90% of YouTube. Do not listen to them when they want you to get angry at your neighbor. They want us to turn on each other, and it's working. So I'm pushing back on that. And your enemy is not a school bus driver. It is not a nurse or a nurse's aide or a teacher who won't get vaccinated. That is not your enemy. Your enemy is the oligarchy and the establishment. Because let's remember, 200,000 people would still be alive in this country if we had Medicare for all, and they're refusing to give you that. And they pretend to care about this COVID virus, and they pretend to care about your health, and they don't give a shit about either. They only give a shit about their political career and their donors' money. That's all they care about. So don't fall for the bait. Keep your eye on the establishment, Joe Biden, the Justice Department, the media. Keep your eye on them as they persecute Julian Assange and let him rot and die. So don't turn on your neighbor. Other Americans aren't your enemy. Your enemy is the oligarchy. Hey, come see one of our live stand-up shows December 10th or 17th or New Year's Eve at the Two Roads Theater in Studio City, California. See you there. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets.